The multiverse did not begin with madness or war. It began with a question, a whisper in the dark, asking, what if things had gone another way? Not to undo what was told, but to imagine what was never given a chance. Not to rewrite the rules, but to remember they were never permanent. A single decision creates a ripple, a breath held too long, a glance turned away, a word left unspoken. Suddenly, the story bends, and what once felt inevitable becomes optional. The hero changes, the villain softens, the ending unravels and reforms into something unrecognizable. In this space between realities, creativity is no longer a prisoner. It becomes infinite, unleashed, a wildfire of color and consequence. Nothing is sacred, and everything is possible here. Peggy Carter doesn't wait for permission. T'Challa saves the galaxy without raising a fist. Strange breaks his heart just to see her smile again. There are no blueprints here, no studio mandates whispering in the background, just raw invention stitched together with emotion and risk. Each episode a reminder that we have barely scratched the surface of what Marvel can be, that within every side character, every throwaway line, lies a universe waiting to be born. But this isn't just about animation or alternate timelines. It's about daring, about breaking from the cycle of predictability and painting with new colors. It's about mourning what was never explored while celebrating the beauty of what could be. It's about seeing heroes fall and still believing they mattered, even when their stories end in silence. In this video, we're diving into how What If became a masterpiece of imagination, how it cracked open the cage Marvel built around itself, how it showed us the stories we were never allowed to see, and how in every shattered world, we found something more honest, more human, and more unforgettable than we ever expected. There's a strange comfort in knowing what happens next, in watching heroes follow a path we've memorized, in seeing the familiar beats of fate repeat like a song we know by heart. But what if cracked that rhythm wide open? It invited us to imagine not what was, but what could be. It didn't follow formulas, it fractured them. It didn't ask permission, it painted in wild colors. From the very first frame, it felt like freedom. Like someone finally unchained the imagination and let it run wild. Not to replace the stories we knew, but to expand what they could become. We saw Peggy take the serum and rewrite history with grace and grit. We watched T'Challa bring peace to the stars by choosing compassion over conquest. Every episode became a doorway to a universe just out of reach, a possibility we hadn't dared to dream. The voice of the Watcher guided us through these realms, not to interfere, but to witness. To remind us that every choice ripples into something bigger, that every decision splinters into stories we never get to see, until now. And in that curiosity, something stirred, a sense that maybe we've only scratched the surface of what Marvel can be, that the canon is just one version, and maybe the best stories are the ones not yet told. For all the beauty in What If, there's an ache buried underneath, a sense of what the movies never dared to explore, a frustration with how often creativity was confined to comfort zones, how too many arcs were wrapped in neat ribbons and missed their potential. The MCU gave us structure, but it also gave us limits. Heroes rarely failed in meaningful ways. Consequences came but rarely lingered. Risk was filtered through box office expectations, and that made the world feel safe. Maybe too safe. What If shattered that safety? It let Tony die over and over, because sometimes sacrifice is not poetic. It let strange alliances form from necessity, not nostalgia. It let heroes fall, not to rise again, but to stay fallen. And somehow, it felt more real, because life doesn't always come full circle. Sometimes it spirals, sometimes the good guy loses. Sometimes the lesson doesn't land until it's too late. And the show had the courage to show that. With animation, with honesty. And so we ask why. Why couldn't the live-action stories dare to be this bold? Why couldn't we see more pain, more complexity, more wild possibility? The answers sit quietly in budget sheets and branding guides, but the questions still burn. There is something haunting about lost potential, about characters who were never allowed to break free from their assigned roles, about arcs that began with fire and ended with silence. And What If became a graveyard for the stories we never got to see. Natasha surviving in a world torn apart, Ultron winning and learning nothing from it, Doctor Strange destroying his universe just to bring back the one person he loved. These weren't just twists, they were tragedies, and they lingered long after the credits rolled. We felt the weight of Peggy dancing with a ghost, of Peter Parker trying to smile through apocalypse, of Gamora standing beside a Tony who never made it to Earth. Each moment a glimpse of beauty drowned in loss, a reminder that even gods and warriors can break. In those fragments, something deeply human emerged. Not just the spectacle of battles or the glory of victory, but the sorrow of missed chances, of friendships never formed, of love lost to time and timelines. The show didn't just entertain, it mourned. It grieved for the stories that never unfolded. And in that grief, it gave us something rare. A chance to feel with open eyes and open hearts. Still, through all the sorrow, there was wonder. A limitless canvas splashed with color and chaos. A celebration of the infinite. From zombie worlds to multiversal wars, it was a spectacle that never blinked. We saw strange wield dark magic with trembling hands. We saw Ultron pierce the veil of reality and challenge the Watcher himself. We saw a team forged not by fate, but by necessity, pulled from the corners of countless collapsed realities. It wasn't just entertainment, it was an epic. A reminder that the multiverse is not just a gimmick, but a stage for boundless creativity. For stories that can twist, evolve, and breathe without fear. There were moments that felt mythic, that made the MCU feel small by comparison. Because when every law is shattered, what remains is imagination itself, raw, untamed, alive. And in that AEW, we saw what could be. Not just new characters or costumes, but a new way to tell stories. With no map, no chains, just courage. What If wasn't just a show, was a spark. A vision of what Marvel could become if it let go of its fears. If it trusted the storytellers more than the spreadsheets. If it believed that audiences crave the unknown, not just the familiar. It showed us that animation isn't lesser, it's liberating. That voice acting can carry as much emotion as any live performance. That heroes don't need to be photorealistic to feel real. That stories don't need connective tissue to matter. They only need meaning. And maybe, just maybe, it lit a fire in the future of Marvel. Maybe it whispered to the writers and directors that rules are meant to be tested. That canon is a guide, not a cage. That fans don't just want spectacle, they want surprise. They want sincerity. They want soul. The multiverse is not just a narrative tool, it's a door. One that swings both ways. One that invites risk, reinvention, redefinition. One that says the best story might be the one no one expected. One that doesn't need a sequel to be important. And so we hope that this wasn't a one-time miracle. That the freedom we saw in What If can bleed into everything that comes next. That Marvel dares to dream again. That they remember animation can do more than fill a schedule, it can leave a mark. And that maybe, just maybe, the boldest stories haven't been told yet. But hope always walks hand in hand with tragedy. Because not all sparks become flames. Not all visions become reality. And What If may forever remain the exception, not the rule. The show gave us a taste of the infinite. And in doing so, reminded us how confined the rest has been. How rare it is for Marvel to take real risks. To tell stories that end in silence instead of applause. That lean into pain instead of wrapping it in gold. There's a tragedy in knowing what could have been. In watching boldness bloom in one corner, while the rest remains careful. In seeing creativity unshackled, only to return to the familiar script. In knowing the potential is there, but fearing it won't be used. But even if What If never shapes the rest of the MCU, even if it stays an isolated spark in the dark, it changed the way we see these characters. It changed what we believe is possible. It changed the standard. And that change doesn't disappear just because the next film plays it safe. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that single glimpse was all we needed to demand better, to dream louder. To believe that one day, Marvel might look at its infinite canvas, and finally, choose to paint without limits. Choose to fall without fear. Choose to create something unforgettable, just because they can.